The metal platform felt cold beneath Lyra's bare feet. She stood there, shaking, while hundreds of eyes stared at her from the crowd below. The Blackstone Market was the largest trading hub in the Outer Rim, and today she was just another piece of merchandise waiting to be sold. Lyra was small even for a Varani. Her pale blue skin seemed to glow under the harsh lights of the auction house. Her large eyes, crystalline and silver, darted nervously across the sea of faces. Most of them were not human faces. There were Crothans with their thick armor plating and cruel smiles. There were Zelix traders with their 6 arms and cold, calculating stares. There were Drugans, massive and brutal, who bought slaves for their labor camps in the asteroid fields. She tried to make herself smaller, wrapping her thin arms around her body. It did not help. Nothing helped. The auctioneer, a fat Quellan with purple skin and too many teeth, grabbed her shoulder and pulled her forward. "Look at this one," he shouted to the crowd. His voice boomed through the speakers. "A young Varani female. Fresh. Healthy. And best of all, she is empathic." The crowd murmured with interest. Lyra felt her stomach twist. Being empathic was supposed to be a gift among her people. The Varani could sense emotions, feel what others felt. It helped them live in peace on their colony world. But here, in places like this, it made her valuable. Valuable in all the wrong ways. "She can sense your enemy's fear," the auctioneer continued. "She can tell when someone lies. Perfect for interrogation, perfect for negotiations, perfect for entertainment." Lyra closed her eyes, trying to block out the wave of emotions crashing over her. She could feel everything. The Krathan in the front row radiated cruel excitement. The Zelix merchant felt cold greed. The Drugan overseer, the one with scars covering his face, felt something worse. Something dark and hungry. This was not the first time she had been sold. 3 times before she had stood on platforms like this one. 3 times before she had been taken away by owners who saw her as a tool, a toy, a thing to be used until she broke. The first owner had used her empathic abilities to cheat in business deals. The second had enjoyed making her sense the pain coming before he caused it. The third had been the worst. She tried not to remember the third. 2 months ago she had escaped during a transport malfunction. For 3 beautiful days she had been free. Then the slavers found her hiding in a cargo bay, and now she was here again. "We will start the bidding at 5,000 credits," the auctioneer announced. Hands and appendages shot up across the crowd. The numbers climbed quickly. 6,000. 7,000. 8,000. Lyra felt each bid like a weight pressing down on her chest. Then she sensed something different. Something that made her freeze. There was a human in the back of the crowd. Lyra had never seen a human in person before, but she knew what they were. Everyone in the Outer Rim knew about humans. They were dangerous. Ruthless. When Earth had joined the galactic community 50 years ago, humans had spread across the stars like wildfire. Some became heroes. Most became something else. In the lawless zones, human slavers were the most feared. They were creative in their cruelty. They did not follow the old rules that even the worst alien species followed. Humans were unpredictable, and that made them terrifying. The human was watching her. Lyra could feel his attention like a weight. He was older, maybe 50 cycles by human standards. His face was weathered and scarred, with lines around his eyes that spoke of hard years. His hair was gray at the temples. He wore a simple brown jacket over work clothes, nothing fancy, nothing that suggested wealth. But his emotions. Oh, his emotions were strange. Lyra had learned to read the feelings of buyers. Most felt greed or lust or the sick pleasure of having power over others. This human felt tired. So tired. There was sadness in him, deep and old like a wound that never healed. And underneath it all, there was determination. Grim, solid determination. 10,000, someone shouted. It was the scarred Drugan overseer, the one whose emotions made Lyra want to crawl out of her own skin. The human in the back raised his hand. 12,000. His voice was rough but calm. Several heads turned to look at him. Lyra's heart began to race. "No, please no. Anyone but a human." 15,000, the Drugan growled. 18,000, the human said, not raising his voice. The crowd was getting excited now. A bidding war was always good entertainment. Lyra felt dizzy. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. Guards with shock weapons stood at every exit. The Drugan's face darkened. 20,000. The human paused. Lyra felt a flash of worry from him, quickly buried under that same grim determination. 25,000. The crowd gasped. That was a fortune for a single slave, even an empathic one. The Drugan roared in anger but said nothing more. 25,000 was more than he had, and everyone knew it. 25,000 credits. The auctioneer shouted gleefully. Going once. Going twice. Lyra's legs felt weak. She could sense the human's emotions more clearly now. There was no cruel excitement. No dark hunger. Just that bone-deep exhaustion and the determination burning beneath it. It made no sense. Why would he pay so much if not for the usual reasons? Sold. To the human in the back. The gavel came down with a sound like thunder. Lyra felt her world tilt. The guards grabbed her arms and pulled her off the platform. Her feet barely touched the ground as they dragged her through the crowd toward the back. The human waited there, his scarred face unreadable. Up close she could see more details. His eyes were gray like storm clouds. His hands were rough and calloused from work. He was tall by human standards but not massive like some species. Still, Lyra only came up to his chest. "Here's your property," one of the guards said, shoving Lyra forward. She stumbled and nearly fell. The human caught her arm, steadying her. His touch was gentle. That confused her even more. "Thank you," the human said to the guard. His voice was polite but cold. He completed the transaction on a data pad, transferring the credits. Lyra watched the numbers flash across the screen. 25,000. He had spent 25,000 credits on her. When the guards left, the human looked down at her. Lyra stared back, her empathic senses working frantically. She felt his exhaustion, his sadness, his determination. But she also felt something else now. Guilt. He felt guilty. "My name is Thomas Wade," he said quietly. "I have a ship at Dock 7. Can you walk or do you need help?" Lyra could not speak. Her voice had frozen in her throat. She could only sense his emotions, trying desperately to understand them. Why guilt? Why sadness? What was he planning? Thomas waited for a moment, then nodded. "Okay. Stay close to me. The market is dangerous." He turned and started walking. Lyra followed because she had no choice. Her legs moved automatically, trained by months of obedience. Her mind raced with fear. Humans were the most dangerous species in the Outer Rim. Everyone said so. And now she belonged to one. As they walked through the crowded market, Lyra felt Thomas's emotions like a storm inside her head. Whatever he had planned for her, whatever horrors awaited on his ship, she knew one thing with terrible certainty. Her nightmare had just begun. The ship was called Wandering Star. Thomas led Lyra up the boarding ramp without saying much. She followed, her bare feet silent on the metal floor. Every step took her further from the market and deeper into the unknown. Lyra had been on many ships before. Slave transports were usually dirty, cramped, with cages stacked on top of cages. She expected the same now. But when Thomas opened the door, she saw something different. The ship was old but clean. The corridors were narrow but well maintained. Everything had a worn, used look, but nothing was broken or filthy. The air smelled like oil and metal and something cooking. Real food, not the nutrient-paced slaves usually got. Thomas walked ahead of her through the corridor. Lyra's empathic senses were working overtime, trying to read him. She felt his exhaustion more clearly now. It was bone-deep, like he had not slept properly in years. The sadness was there too, a constant ache that never went away. But still no cruelty. No anticipation of violence. It made no sense. They stopped at a door. Thomas pressed a button and it slid open. "This is your cabin," he said. Lyra stepped inside slowly, expecting a trap. But it was just a small room. There was a bed, narrow but clean, with actual sheets and a pillow. A small desk. A locker for belongings. A tiny attached bathroom. The room was simple and plain, but it was clean. Cleaner than anywhere she had slept in months. "The door locks from the inside," Thomas said. "You can lock it if you want. No one will bother you." Lyra stared at him. Lock it from the inside? That made no sense. Slaves did not get locks. Slaves got cages or chains or shock collars. Thomas seemed to understand her confusion. "I will bring you food in an hour. Try to rest." He turned to leave. Lyra found her voice, small and shaky. "What do you want from me?" Thomas stopped. He did not turn around. "Nothing right now. Just rest." Then he was gone and the door slid shut. Lyra stood frozen in the middle of the room. Her empathic senses reached out, following Thomas's emotions through the wall. He walked away down the corridor. She felt his sadness spike for a moment, then that grim determination again. But no anger. No dark excitement. Nothing that made sense for someone who had just bought a slave. She checked the door. The lock worked. She pressed it and heard it click. She was locked in, but from the inside, just like he said. She could unlock it whenever she wanted. Lyra sat on the bed. The mattress was soft. Real foam, not the hard metal slabs she was used to. She touched the pillow. It was clean. Everything was clean. This had to be a trick. A test. Her second owner had done things like this. He would be kind at first, offering comfort and safety. Then, when she relaxed, when she started to hope, he would take it all away. He enjoyed watching hope die in her eyes. Lyra curled up on the bed, making herself small. She would not fall for it. She would not hope. Hope was dangerous. An hour later, exactly like Thomas said, there was a knock on the door. "I have food," his voice came through the intercom. Lyra did not answer. She heard him sigh. "I am leaving it outside the door. Eat when you are ready." Footsteps walked away. Lyra waited for 10 minutes before she unlocked the door and looked out. There was a tray on the floor. On it was a plate with real food. Cooked vegetables. Some kind of grain. A piece of protein that might have been synthetic meat but looked fresh. A cup of clean water. Even a piece of fruit. She grabbed the tray quickly and locked the door again. She ate sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, watching the door the whole time. The food was simple but good. Better than anything she had eaten in months. This pattern continued for 3 days. Thomas brought food 3 times a day. He knocked. He announced himself. He left the tray and walked away. He never tried to come in. He never demanded anything. At night, Lyra could sense him in the cockpit at the front of the ship, not sleeping, just sitting there with his sadness and his exhaustion. On the second day, Lyra started exploring her cabin more. The bathroom had a shower. Real water, not just sonic cleaners. There was soap. Clean towels. She stood under the hot water for a long time, washing away the filth of the market. On the third day, she found clothes in the locker. Simple work clothes in her size. A jacket. Soft shoes that actually fit her feet. She put them on and felt almost like a person again instead of property. But she still did not understand. What was Thomas waiting for? What did he want? Her empathic senses gave her no answers. Every time she focused on him, she felt the same things. Exhaustion. Sadness. Determination. And that guilt, always present like a weight he carried. On the 4th day, Lyra made a decision. She could not stand not knowing anymore. When Thomas brought breakfast, she opened the door before he could walk away. He stopped, looking surprised. This was the first time she had opened the door while he was still there. "Can I ask you something?" Lyra's voice was still quiet, but steadier than before. "Of course," Thomas said. He set the tray down on the floor and stepped back, giving her space. "What do you want from me?" Thomas looked at her for a long moment. His gray eyes were tired. So tired. "Nothing." "That is not true," Lyra said. Her empathic abilities let her sense lies, and that was not exactly a lie, but it was not the whole truth either. "You spent 25,000 credits. Nobody spends that much for nothing." Thomas sighed. He leaned against the corridor wall, suddenly looking even older. "You're right. I do want something." Lyra braced herself. Here it came. The truth. The real reason. "I want you to eat," Thomas said. "I want you to rest. I want you to feel safe. That is what I want." "Why?" The word came out as almost a whisper. "Because nobody should live the way you have been living," Thomas said simply. "Because you are a person, not property. Because I could help, so I did." Lyra felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She pushed them back. "I do not understand." "I know." Thomas pushed himself off the wall. "You do not have to understand right now. Just eat. Rest. We have a long journey ahead." "Journey to where?" "Somewhere safe," Thomas said. "Somewhere you can start over." He started to walk away. Lyra called after him. "Why do you feel so guilty?" Thomas stopped. He did not turn around. For a long moment he said nothing. Then quietly, "Because I was not fast enough to save someone else. Someone who needed help. So now I try to be fast enough for people like you." He walked away before Lyra could ask anything else. She stood in the doorway holding the frame for support. Her empathic senses were going wild. Everything Thomas said was true. All of it. He really did not want anything from her. He really just wanted her to be safe. For the first time in months, Lyra felt something she thought was dead inside her. It was small and fragile and dangerous, but it was there. Hope. A week into the journey, Lyra began leaving her cabin. At first, it was just for a few minutes. She would step into the corridor, look around, then retreat back to safety. But Thomas never came when she was out. He seemed to know she needed space, needed time to explore without feeling watched. The ship was larger than she thought. There was the cockpit at the front where Thomas spent most of his time. A small galley where he cooked simple meals. A cargo hold that was mostly empty. an engine room that hummed with power, and maintenance corridors that ran throughout the ship like veins. Lyra found herself drawn to watch Thomas work. She would stand in doorways, observing as he checked systems, repaired broken panels, or cleaned parts of the ship. He worked with steady, practiced movements. His hands were always busy. He noticed her watching on the third day of this, but he did not say anything. He just kept working. After a while, he started explaining what he was doing. "This is the navigation computer," he said, not looking at her directly. "It calculates the safest routes between systems. Has to be calibrated every few days or the coordinates drift." Lyra listened. She did not speak, but she listened. The next day, Thomas was fixing a panel in the galley. "The air recycling system," he explained, "keeps the ship's atmosphere clean. Without it, we would run out of breathable air in about 40 hours. Lyra stepped a little closer. Her empathic senses told her Thomas was not bothered by her presence. If anything, he seemed glad to have someone to talk to, even if she did not talk back. On the 5th day, she helped him. Thomas was organizing supplies in the cargo hold, moving heavy crates from one side to the other. He was doing it alone, struggling with the weight. Lyra watched for a while, then quietly stepped forward and lifted the other end of a crate. Thomas looked surprised, but he nodded. "Thank you." Together they moved the crates. Lyra was not strong, but she was quick and could fit into small spaces. She found herself actually enjoying the work. It felt good to do something useful. After they finished, Thomas made tea in the galley. He poured 2 cups and offered her one. Lyra hesitated, then took it. They sat at the small table, not speaking, just drinking tea together. It was the most normal thing Lyra had experienced in months, and it made her want to cry. Everything changed on the 8th day. Lyra was in her cabin when the alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed in the corridors. The ship shuddered and groaned. She felt Thomas's emotions spike with sudden panic and rushed out to see what was wrong. Thomas was running toward the engine room. "Stay in your cabin," he shouted over his shoulder. But Lyra did not stay. She followed him, driven by an instinct she did not fully understand. When she reached the engine room, she found Thomas staring at a control panel with horror on his face. "What is wrong?" she asked. "Coolant leak in the main engine," Thomas said, his fingers flying over the controls. "If I cannot seal it in the next 5 minutes, the core will overheat." "If the core overheats?" He did not finish, but Lyra understood. "If the core overheated, the ship would explode." "What can I do?" The words came out before she could think about them. Thomas looked at her, surprised. Then he pointed to a narrow access tunnel. "There is a manual valve down there. It is too small for me to reach. If you can get down there and turn it clockwise until it stops, it will seal the leak from the inside." Lyra looked at the tunnel. It was dark and narrow and went down into the guts of the ship. Every instinct told her not to go. Her third owner had used to trap her in small spaces as punishment. The memory made her freeze. But Thomas's emotions washed over her through her empathic senses. He was terrified, but not for himself. He was terrified for her. He was already planning how to get her to an escape pod, how to save her if the ship exploded. He would die, but he was trying to figure out how to save her. That broke something inside Lyra. Or maybe it fixed something. "Show me where," she said. Thomas's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "Show me." He led her to the access tunnel and explained exactly what to do. "Straight down about 3 meters. The valve is on your left. Turn it until it stops. Then come right back up." Lyra climbed into the tunnel. It was tight and dark and hot. The metal was burning to touch. She could hear the coolant hissing somewhere below her. Her heart pounded. Her breathing came fast. But she kept going. Down, down, down. Her hands found the valve. It was hot, almost too hot to hold. She gripped it anyway and turned. It was stuck. She pulled harder, ignoring the pain in her palms. Finally it moved. She turned it clockwise, counting the rotations. 1, 2, 3, 4. Finally it stopped. The hissing sound faded. The red light stopped flashing. Lyra climbed back up. Thomas pulled her out of the tunnel, checking her hands. They were red and blistered from the hot metal. "You did it," he said, his voice shaking. "You saved the ship." He grabbed the medical kit and started treating her burns, his hands gentle but efficient. Lyra watched his face. She felt his emotions clearly now. Relief, gratitude, and something else. Pride. He was proud of her. "You are very brave," Thomas said quietly as he wrapped her hands in bandages. No one had ever called Lyra brave before. She had been called many things. Useful, broken, worthless, but never brave. "Why did you panic?" she asked. "Not for the ship. For me. I felt it. Thomas finished with the bandages. He sat back looking old and tired again. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I had a daughter once, Sarah. She would have been about your age now. Lyra's empathic senses flooded with his grief. It was old grief, worn smooth by years, but still sharp underneath. What happened to her? Lyra asked, though she already knew the answer from his emotions. Raiders attacked our colony. I was off-world on a cargo run. By the time I got back. Thomas stopped. He did not need to finish. I am sorry, Lyra said. I was not fast enough to save her, Thomas continued. I was not there when she needed me. So when I saw you on that auction platform He trailed off. Lyra understood now. She understood everything. Thomas had not bought her because he wanted a slave or a tool or a possession. He had bought her because he could not save his daughter, and saving Lyra was the only way he knew how to carry that grief. You bought me to save someone you could not save before, Lyra said softly. Thomas nodded. I know it is not fair to you. You are not Sarah. You are your own person. But when I saw you there so scared I could not walk away. For the first time Lyra reached out and touched his hand. Thomas looked surprised. Thank you, she said. For saving me. Thomas's eyes got wet. He blinked rapidly. You saved the ship today. That makes us even. Lyra shook her head. No, not even. You are still ahead. They sat together in the engine room while the ship hummed around them. And for the first time since her capture, Lyra felt something growing inside her chest. It was small and fragile, like a tiny plant pushing through frozen ground. It was trust. 3 weeks after the engine incident, the Wandering Star approached Sanctum Station. Lyra stood in the cockpit beside Thomas, watching the massive station grow larger on the view screen. It was beautiful in its own way. Thousands of lights sparkled against the darkness of space. Ships of every size and shape docked at the outer rings. This was a neutral zone, a place where the Galactic Council's laws actually meant something. We will dock in about an hour, Thomas said. He had been quiet all morning. Lyra could feel his emotions churning. Sadness, determination, and something that felt almost like dread. Why are we here? Lyra asked. In the past 3 weeks she had started talking more. Started asking questions. Thomas always answered honestly. Because this is where you start your new life, Thomas said. Lyra's heart skipped. What do you mean? Thomas reached into his jacket and pulled out a data chip. He held it out to her. These are your freedom papers. Legal documents registered with the Galactic Council. You are no longer property. You are a free citizen. Lyra stared at the chip like it might explode. I do not understand. I bought you to set you free, Thomas explained. Sanctum Station is safe. I have arranged everything. A job. A place to live. Money to get started. Everything you need. The words hit Lyra like a physical blow. She had to sit down in the co-pilot's chair. Her empathic senses were going wild, trying to process Thomas's emotions. He meant it. Every word was true. He was really going to let her go. Why? The word came out as a whisper. Because you deserve to be free, Thomas said simply. Because keeping you would make me no different from the people who hurt you. Lyra felt tears forming. But the money. 25,000 credits. You will lose everything. Thomas smiled, but it was a sad smile. Money comes and goes. Your freedom is worth more than credits. The ship docked an hour later. Thomas led Lyra through the station corridors. Sanctum Station was nothing like Blackstone Market. Here people walked freely. No cages. No auction blocks. Security officers in clean uniforms kept order. Shops sold goods instead of lives. They stopped at a small office near the commercial district. Inside, a Thraxian female waited behind a desk. She was old, her scales faded to a gentle gray color. Her eyes were kind. Thomas, she greeted warmly. And this must be Lyra. Lyra, this is Merchant Kess, Thomas said. She runs a textile business here on the station. She has agreed to give you a job. Kess smiled at Lyra. I have heard good things about you, child. Thomas tells me you are a hard worker. Lyra could only nod. Her voice had disappeared again. Kess stood and gestured for them to follow. She led them through the station to a small apartment in the residential section. It was tiny, just one room with a bed, a cooking area, and a bathroom. But it was clean and safe and had a door that locked from the inside. This is yours, Kess said. Rent is paid for the first 3 months. After that, your wages from working in my shop will cover it easily. Fair wages, I promise. No tricks. Lyra walked around the small space, touching the walls, the bed, the tiny kitchen counter. Her own place. Her own home. The job is simple, Kes continued. I need someone to help organize inventory, assist customers, and keep the shop clean. The work is not hard and you will have 2 days off each week. I treat my employees well. You can ask any of them. Thomas pulled out another data chip. This has 5,000 credits on it. Enough to buy food, clothes, whatever you need while you get settled. Lyra took the chip with shaking hands. This is too much. It is not enough, Thomas said quietly. Nothing I do will ever be enough to make up for what was done to you. But it is a start. Kes excused herself, saying she would return in an hour to show Lyra the shop. When she left, Lyra and Thomas stood alone in the small apartment. Lyra's empathic senses were overwhelmed. She could feel everything Thomas felt. The sadness of saying goodbye. The determination to do the right thing. The hope that she would be okay. And underneath it all, that constant guilt he carried. But there was something else too. Something she had not sensed before. Thomas felt like he was fighting something. Fighting against what people expected humans to be. Fighting to prove that humans could be better than their reputation. You do this a lot, Lyra said suddenly. Buy slaves and free them. Thomas looked surprised. How did you know? I can feel it. You have done this before. Many times. Thomas nodded slowly. When I can. When I have enough credits saved up. I cannot save everyone, but I can save some. Why? Lyra asked again. Because humans have a bad reputation in the Outer Rim, Thomas said. We earned it. Too many of us became slavers, pirates, mercenaries. We came to the stars and brought our worst qualities with us. He looked out the small window at the station beyond. I cannot change what other humans do. But I can try to be different. I can try to show that not all of us are monsters. Lyra felt the truth of his words. Thomas was not just saving slaves. He was fighting a lonely war against his own species' reputation. One freed slave at a time. You will leave now, Lyra said. It was not a question. I have to, Thomas said. I have another cargo run. Bills to pay. More credits to earn so I can help the next person. And you will go back to Blackstone Market. Eventually. Yes. Lyra turned away, looking out the window. Below, she could see the commercial district. People shopping, working, living normal lives. Free lives. Everything she had dreamed of during her captivity was right here, offered to her on a data chip and a job contract. She should be happy. She should be grateful. She was both of those things. But she was also something else. She was angry. Not at Thomas. Never at Thomas. But angry that he would go back to those terrible places alone. Angry that he carried his guilt and grief like weights around his neck. Angry that he had saved her but could not save himself from his own sadness. And underneath the anger was something stronger. Something that had been growing for 3 weeks, since the day he first brought her food and asked for nothing in return. Lyra made her decision. She turned back to Thomas. I want to ask you something. Anything, Thomas said. What if I do not want to stay here? Thomas looked confused. You do not like the apartment? We can find another one. Or a different job if you prefer. No, Lyra interrupted. What if I want to come with you? Thomas stared at her. What? I want to join your crew, Lyra said, the words coming faster now. As an employee. With a real contract and fair pay. I want to help you save others like you saved me. No, Thomas said immediately. Absolutely not. It is too dangerous. You have a safe life here. A real chance to... To what? Lyra asked. To pretend I was never a slave? To forget about the others still suffering? Lyra. You said I am free, Lyra said. So I am free to choose. And I choose this. Thomas looked at her for a long moment. Through her empathic senses, Lyra felt his emotions warring inside him. He wanted to protect her. He wanted her to be safe. But he also felt something else. Something that felt almost like hope. Why? He asked finally. Lyra smiled for the first time in months. Because you showed me that humans can be good. Now I want to help you show others. Thomas stared at Lyra for what felt like forever. She could feel the battle raging inside him through her empathic senses. Every protective instinct told him to refuse. To keep her safe here on Sanctum Station where nothing could hurt her. But there was something else too. A tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, he did not have to carry his burden alone anymore. You do not know what you are asking, Thomas said finally. The places I go are dangerous. The people I deal with are monsters. Every time I walk into a slave market I risk being caught, killed, or worse. I know, Lyra said calmly. I was in those markets. I know exactly what they are like. Then you should understand why I cannot let you. You cannot let me? Lyra interrupted. You just gave me my freedom papers. You said I am free. So you cannot stop me from making my own choices. Thomas opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked almost amused despite his worry. You are using my own words against me. Yes, Lyra said. Because they are true. I am free now. Free to choose my own path. And I choose to help you. Why? Thomas asked. You could have a normal life here. Safe. Peaceful. Why would you want to go back to those places? Lyra walked over to the window. Below, people went about their lives. Free people who had never known chains or auction blocks or the feeling of being property. Because I remember, she said quietly. I remember every face I saw in those markets. Other slaves just as scared as I was. Some of them were children, Thomas. Younger than your daughter was. She turned back to face him. How can I live a peaceful life knowing they are still suffering? Knowing I could help but chose not to? Thomas closed his eyes. She felt a wave of emotion from him. Pain, pride, and that deep, aching sadness that never left him. There is another reason, Lyra continued. I can sense emotions, remember? I know what you are planning. You are going to go back out there alone. You are going to keep buying slaves and freeing them until you run out of money or luck. And eventually your luck will run out. Maybe, Thomas admitted. I can help, Lyra said. My empathic abilities. I can sense when someone is lying. I can tell if a buyer is dangerous or if a slaver is planning something. I can help keep you safe while you help others. Thomas was quiet for a long time. Finally he spoke. If you do this, it has to be done right. A proper contract. Fair wages. You will be crew, not cargo. And if you ever want to leave, you can. No questions asked. Agreed, Lyra said immediately. And you have to promise me something, Thomas added. If a situation gets too dangerous, if I tell you to run, you run. You save yourself. Promise me. Lyra hesitated. Then nodded. I promise. Thomas pulled out his datapad and started writing. Then we do this properly. Legal employment contract. Wages of 500 credits per month, plus room and board. 2 days off per week when possible. Medical care. Profit sharing on successful cargo runs. That is too much, Lyra protested. That is what you are worth, Thomas said firmly. This is not charity. You will earn every credit. The work is hard and the hours are long. They registered the contract at Sanctum Station's legal office that same day. Kess was disappointed to lose a potential employee but understood. She even gave Lyra some basic supplies for the journey. You are doing a brave thing, child, Kess said as they said goodbye. The galaxy needs more people willing to fight for what is right. The first few months were an adjustment. Lyra learned how to operate the ship's systems. Thomas taught her basic navigation, engine maintenance, and how to handle herself in a fight. She was small but quick, and her empathic senses gave her an advantage in reading opponents. Their first mission together came 6 weeks later. Another slave market, smaller than Blackstone but just as cruel. Thomas had saved enough credits to buy 1 slave. They chose carefully. Lyra walked through the market with Thomas, her empathic senses scanning the cages. So many desperate emotions. Fear, pain, hopelessness. It was overwhelming, but she pushed through it. Then she felt something different. A young Draxian boy, no more than 10 cycles old, huddled in a cage. His emotions were unusual. Despite everything, there was still fight in him. Still defiance. He had not given up yet. Him, Lyra said, pointing. Thomas looked at the boy, then nodded. Good choice. They bought the boy for 8,000 credits and freed him at the next safe port. He cried when Thomas gave him his freedom papers. The last they saw of him, he was starting a new job at a mining colony that treated workers fairly. That became their pattern. Travel. Trade. Save money. Find the markets. Free whoever they could. 1 person at a time. Lyra's empathic abilities proved invaluable. She could sense when slavers were planning raids. She could tell when buyers were undercover law enforcement or vigilantes. She saved Thomas from walking into traps more than once. 6 months in, they freed a Corvin mechanic named Tess. She was older, skilled, and had nowhere else to go. When Thomas offered her normal passage to a safe port, she asked if she could stay instead. The ship needed a full-time mechanic and she needed a purpose. Tess joined the crew. 8 months in, they freed a young human named Peter who had been enslaved for debts his family owed. He had been a cargo manager before his capture and knew shipping routes better than anyone. He joined them too. 10 months in, they freed a Varani woman named Kira. She was empathic like Lyra but older and more experienced. She had been a teacher before she was captured. She joined their growing crew and started teaching everyone, sharing knowledge and skills. The Wandering Star was no longer a lonely ship with one sad man trying to save the galaxy by himself. It was a home. A family. A crew of people who had survived the worst and chose to fight back. Now, 1 year after Lyra first asked to join Thomas's crew, they stood together at the edge of another slave market. This one was on a station called Red Harbor, even more lawless than Blackstone. The crew gathered in the Wandering Star's common room for their pre-mission briefing. Thomas, Lyra, Tess, Peter, and Kira. 5 people who had been broken and put themselves back together. "We have enough for 2 this time," Thomas said, checking their funds. "Maybe 3 if the prices are low." "I will scan for the most salvageable," Lyra said. "The ones with the best chance of recovery." "I will monitor security channels," Peter added. "Make sure no raids are planned." "And I will have the ship ready for a quick exit," Tess said. "Just in case." Kira smiled. "We have become quite the operation." Thomas looked around at his crew. At his family. Lyra felt his emotions clearly. The sadness was still there. It would probably always be there. But there was something else now too. Pride. Purpose. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit of peace. "Remember," Thomas said. "We save who we can. We do not take unnecessary risks. And we always come home together." Together, they all echoed. They walked into Red Harbor Market as a unit. Lyra no longer trembled in fear at these places. She walked with her head high, her empathic senses focused and sharp. Beside her, Thomas walked with the same grim determination he always had. But now he was not alone. They found 3 slaves that day. A young girl who reminded Lyra of herself. An elderly Quellan who had been a scholar before capture. And a middle-aged man who had lost everything but still had hope in his eyes. They freed all 3. As they walked back to the ship with their new passengers, Lyra felt something she had never expected to feel in a place like this. She felt powerful. Not because she had weapons or money or strength, but because she had a purpose. She had people who cared about her. She had a choice. "Thank you," the young girl whispered to Lyra as they boarded the ship. "Thank you for saving me." Lyra smiled and thought about Thomas finding her on that auction block a year ago. Thought about how one person's compassion had changed everything. "Someone saved me once," Lyra said gently. "Now we save others. That is how it works." The Wandering Star lifted off from Red Harbor Station, carrying its precious cargo of freed souls toward safety. Inside, Thomas stood at the controls with Lyra beside him. Behind them, their crew worked together, each person playing their part. They were not heroes. They were just people who had survived darkness and chose to bring light. They could not save everyone. The galaxy was too big and the cruelty too widespread. But they could save some. One person at a time. One auction at a time. One act of compassion at a time. And sometimes, Lyra thought as she watched the stars streak past, sometimes that was enough. In the darkest corners of space, where hope seemed impossible, they proved that compassion could prevail. Not because it was easy. Not because it always won. But because people like Thomas taught people like Lyra that freedom was worth fighting for. And that lesson once learned could never be taken away.